The last dozen or so verses have been concerned with rules. And rules are no good by themselves. They need to have a context. And we return to this context in the next verse. Verse 343. But before I look at this, I would just like to continue on a personal note, something that I touched on in the last video. And it was to do with this fundamental tone, this fundamental mood tone that inhibits our enlightenment practice. And mood tone, I call it a mood tone, it's quite a neutral way of describing it. I mentioned what the Christians call the dark night of the soul, which touches on the emotional quality of this tone to some extent. It could be a tone of utter desolation, utter hopelessness, pointlessness. You get the idea. And I think in modern medical terms, it might even be described as a pathological state deserving of medication. And this is possibly one avenue to take, which I touched on in the previous video. It's not something to be ruled out. Why make things difficult after all? But the interesting thing is, and it's what these rules that we've been looking at highlight, is how we project this tone outwards. When I was speaking in the previous video, I was quite aware of this tone. It was rearing its ugly head. But it passed, and I had a very constructive day. There were certain things that bring it on, and there were things that are touched on in the rules. They're to do with our everyday activity, where we live, the company we keep, how we survive, money, possessions, food. And I notice how I invest this mood, this tone, in external circumstances. It could be my job, it could be my home, my financial situation, my relationship with my friends, with my wife. I sometimes see myself investing all of these with a strong dissatisfaction, a sense of despondency even. And objectively I can see there's no reason for this. There's no reason to be despondent about any of these aspects of my lifestyle. In fact, the lifestyle I'm leading now is one that I actually aspire to. I have a loving wife, a very loving wife. I have a small flat, small 2-bedroom flat, but it's in a nice location, not far from the sea. The job makes very little demand on my resources. It's just a few nights a week. I don't have to think about it when I'm not doing it. It'd be nice to have a job which I found fulfilling, that I found meaningful, that I could put more of myself into. And I always think it's great that certain people have managed to do this. They make a living doing what they love. How wonderful is that? It'd be great if most people could be in that situation, but I think that's a bit equivalent to winning the lottery. Most people in the world have to get by doing menial work. Most jobs are of the menial type. If you can find something better for yourself, then go for it. Otherwise we have to come to terms with doing menial work, which from a Zen point of view is quite a good opportunity to have. So there are all these menial jobs and people have to do them. So I have to accept this menial job that I'm doing isn't so bad. It's got a lot of opportunities, as I said, for Zen practice. It's fairly straightforward, which I appreciate. And I could do with a bigger living space, but actually I could also do with getting rid of a lot of stuff. So it's interesting to see how I invest my dissatisfaction in various factors of my lifestyle. And yet, it's what I've always wanted. This particular lifestyle, a low maintenance lifestyle with a loving wife and the opportunity to get on with many of the things I want to get on with, like these videos and various creative activities. So what's my problem? My problem is I'm looking deeply into things, very deeply. And you dig things up, you stumble across things. Very uncomfortable things, very unpleasant things. Also wonderful, amazing things. And it's the wonderful, amazing things that we're coming across in this text. And this text is now describing the context from which we observe and limit the opportunity to invest what is apparently going on with our mood tones. Verse 343. The yogin should regard the world as removed from birth and death, as exempt from the alternation of being and non-being, though it is seen in the aspect of qualified and qualifying. So, we don't follow the rules for their own sake. We are following the rules to reinforce this understanding. As I was saying, we infuse the world with certain qualities. We qualify it. And in doing so, we reinforce our own mood patterns. So we qualify the world, and it qualifies us. We say the world's like this, and that reinforces our mood patterns. We say the world's a certain way because of our own psychological disposition, and in doing so, we find confirmation for this, and it reinforces our psychological disposition. This is what we get stuck in. As enlightenment practitioners, we're stepping back from that. We step back from the world and we step back from our moods into awareness. And the world seems to be in continual change. Things come and go. Things are born, things die. And this is what affects us. Meeting and parting, gain and loss, birth and death. As enlightenment practitioners, we become indifferent to this, because that's part of the story that hooks us in. This is the dramatic tension which captures our attention and gets us emotionally involved. As enlightenment practitioners, we step back from these hooks. When birth and death is not discriminated, the yogin before long will attain the Samadhi, the powers, the psychic faculties, and the self-mastery. This is a standard list that we've come across before. But we can understand it in terms of enlightenment practice. The Samadhi is that realization of the true nature of awareness, of the pure nature of awareness. The powers means to take back our sense of being, which is constantly being siphoned off into the story of the external world. So we become empowered once again in our own being. The psychic faculties. This is being able to see what's really going on in a way that I was describing at the beginning of this video. We see the mechanism by which our empowerment is being undermined. This is what these rules were about. And in this way we achieve self-mastery. We become master of our own moods. What a powerful possibility. It's at this point that we're living life to the optimum. So this is what we're constantly reinforcing as enlightenment practitioners. It's a mighty struggle. But this text gives us support, and hopefully these videos do too. And the next verses continue to reinforce the possibilities for self-mastery.